war's not won.
Time was gone. The world's falling apart.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vassals of Kingsgrave for our 99th, asterisk episode. We've actually done a couple more than that in our linear reread through A Song of Ice and Fire. My name is Adam, also known as drownedsnow on the podcast of Ice and Fire forums. And today I am joined by Zach.
Hey, this is Alias on the forums.
Michael.
Hey, Khal Wadege on the forums.
Matt.
Yeah, I'm here.
And Varley.
I'm here.
Marie.
Hi everyone, it's Mary, Nymeria on the forums.
All right, and Justin.
Yeah, Archibold on the forums.
All right, so Justin, this is your first time on the podcast. Is that correct?
It is indeed.
All right, so before we dig in here, tell us a little bit. How'd you get into Song of Ice and Fire? How'd you find the podcast? That sort of thing.
So I watched Game of Thrones in 2011, and I'm like, oh, hey, books. And I read all the books in 2011. And then by probably 2013, I was scouring the internet for more content and landed on VOK and started listening and joined the forums a year after that. So that was like 2014. So I've been lurking around here for 5 years, just waiting to speak up. It was Quentyn that brought me here, though. Got to talk about Quentyn.
Well, Quentyn lives, as we all know. But yeah, that's kind of similar. I mean, there are a lot of people that joined in 2011 when the show hit. Kind of same thing for me. Saw the show and then read all the books. So, yeah. Well, welcome. Who is your favorite member of the Kingsguard?
You're killing me.
That's terrible.
Which Kingsguard? I mean, be specific.
This is a good question. Which Kingsguard?
Just any Kingsguard. Who's your favorite Kingsguard?
Any Kingsguard in history?
Yeah.
I'll go with Boros Blount.
Oh, God, what an awful choice.
What?
Hot take.
Well done, Justin.
You name a Kingsguard that's given you more joy than Boros Blount.
Sandra more lusty? I don't know.
Oh, a bad one.
Which book of the series is your favorite?
When I read it, I would have said Dance, but now I think it's Feast. I just love the Riverlands.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Not
He's
a
one
lot
of those.
Not a lot of like Feast love out there. I liked Feast, but that's good. I like it.
You've lost Matt, I think. I mean, Varley.
When you realize you've got like 5 minutes left in a half an hour long television show, and you're like, I just want a little more TV.
Yeah.
That's how I felt when I read Feast and when
That's
I read
what
Dance.
Feast is. That's a great
And now it's 9 years later, and I'm stand by my
Feast
original.
is all about showmanship. It leaves you wanting more. Yeah.
Just give me some more.
I can see that. Okay. All right.
What's your favorite part of Feast? Like what POV?
I like Ario Hota.
Oh, my God.
Wow, you're just going against the grain today. I got to tell you.
No, I like the guys who show up, give us very few POVs, but give us a window into some place or some idea we haven't had before. Some of them are good, and some of them aren't.
That
in
sounds
Feast,
like a good segue into Barristan.
in Feast, who's your
Speaking
favorite
of-
character whose name can be spelled backwards to spell another character's name?
Matt.
Do I have 20 minutes and a piece of paper to work this out?
He doesn't know.
I don't.
What is that reference?
I don't know either. to be
Alaris?
Cross for
Solaris?
7
Yeah,
letters.
the Sphinx.
Okay.
Oh, this thing.
Oh, I thought you meant like two different character POVs.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
so
the
did
same
I.
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is why I asked for
Yeah.
20 minutes and a piece of paper.
Mhm. Bran is in Rob. No, that doesn't work.
It doesn't.
I'm sure there's a random character named Bob or something. That'll work.
Probably. All right. Before we get too far off track here, today we are going to be covering Barristan 2 from Dance with Dragons, which is the Discarded Knight. Quentyn's third chapter, which is the Spurned Suitor. The last Tyrion chapter that we've ever had, Tyrion 12 and Dance. And the Foresaken chapter from the Winds of Winter, the spoiler chapters that have been released, kind of slots in right here as well. So why don't we, let's see, when do these take place? This is all July. Yeah, okay. So why don't we get started with Barristan, the Discarded Knight, and that is Michael?
Yes, I've got this one. Okay, so Barristan watches as Hisdar Zalorak holds court for the first time. There is unease in the throne room, with a fight breaking out when a Myronese noble proclaims Hargaz a hero and dragon slayer. Hisdar makes note of Quentyn Martell and his companions, and Barristan senses that Quentyn will soon be in danger. He briefly wonders whether Quentyn was behind the poisoning of the locusts. The Yunkish envoys arrive and throw Grolio's severed head at the king's feet. Barristan recalls that all three of the kings he had served would have had the envoys killed or imprisoned for this insult, but all Hisdar can do is stare silently. The sellsword captain, Bloodbeard, claims this as payment for Yokaz being trampled to death in Daznak's pit. He releases Hisdar's sisters and cousins, but refuses to release the final three hostages until the dragons have been killed. Hisdar abruptly ends his court session and retreats to have his council deliberate. Barristan stops Quentyn and tells him to leave at once, saying that Hisdar has made note of him, but Quentyn refuses to leave. Barristan mentions the poisoning of the locusts and says that Quentyn will likely be made a scapegoat. Quentyn is shocked by this news and denies any responsibility. Barristan tries to convince Quentyn to leave once more, but again he refuses, saying he cannot go back without Daenerys or he will be forever remembered as a failure.
All right, so that's a Barristan chapter. It's a perfectly acceptable chapter in a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not too much to mine here.
So, can I just say that one of the saddest characters in all these books is Grolio? He just gets sent over by Illyrio. His ships get demolished to make siege engines. Then he's made admiral of a no sea until Zaro Duck Sauce comes, and then his head gets chopped off out of all the hostages. It's just all he wanted to do was get home to see his family.
I honestly forgot he had been killed.
I feel like he had a decent life at least, though. There's a lot of people in this story that just get killed off before they can do anything of value. There's that at least.
So Stefan Sarse has written an essay called "The Word is Grolio," and basically, because in the next chapter, the password is Grolio to start the coup. And basically, he chose this word, Skahaz chose it to play on Barristan, because Barristan is like Grolio in that he is a noble man in a foreign land who just wants to go home. So yeah, the essay talks about how Skahaz is sort of playing Barristan. And we also find out that Skahaz is one of the brazen beasts in this chapter.
Yeah. So how does he keep the beast loyalty?
The fact that the new guy's a dick probably doesn't help to switch over their loyalties. And it mentions that the brazen beasts are made up of freedmen and shavepates, like Skahaz, so they're of a different political class than the Loraks.
Right, they're more aligned toward Daenerys, and he's playing that card. I think Skahaz is.
Yeah.
So here's a fun fact: if you look at all of the horrible Myronese names, whether there is a Zo or a Mo in the middle tells you a bit about their class. So the Zos are the higher up ones, and the Mos tend to be, I don't know what you call it. There's not a middle class in this society, but they're just a bit lower.
I knew.
He's such a Mo. Look what he's wearing. I mean, come on.
I knew Varley was a Mo. Varley was always a Mo.
So where does it say that? That's reflected in the class. I just thought it was is or Ibn or son of kind of name.
You just have to infer it. So like Yurkaz Zoyukaz, which was the commander of the Yunkai, Hizdar Zo Lorak, Skahaz Mo Kondak, Reznak Mo Reznak, who's just the seneschal, Oznek Zo Pal.
He's my favorite.
What other ones?
Yeah, it's definitely the best name.
Grazdan Zo Grazdan, that's one of the Astapori that has the pearls on his toka. Yeah. Little detail.
So speaking of Skahaz, and I know we've talked about this like 1,000 times, but is it generally agreed that he is the one who poisoned the locusts that we see talked about here?
Yes, I would say. Well, at least here on this podcast. I don't know about everyone else.
Oh, you think it's Quentyn?
No, I don't actually think that.
It's like a weird like Fight Club situation where Quentyn is a split personality and the other one's causing chaos. We don't see that. Sorry, spoilers for Fight Club. Put that in the beginning.
Yeah, we don't do spoiler warnings for like 20-year-old material. Anyway, yeah. So yeah, I don't know.
So why does Barristan have a POV? It's an interesting question, right? And we're gonna see more of him in TWOW, but obviously there are some things that we might only have gotten to see if we got Barristan, as we'll see in his next chapter. But is it important enough that we had to have him as a new POV?
Like right here, I mean, especially with what like, because the next chapter is like so connected to this one, you kind of wouldn't have really even needed this chapter, but.
Like Quentyn this could have been in Quentyn's chapter.
Well, except Quentin's dead.
Right.
What about
but then Quentyn dies.
I do like, you know, getting Barristan's inner monologue, and I mean I like Barristan, so I'm not going to complain that so far his chapters not really.
He's gonna. It opens. Oh, sorry, Mariko.
No, just I agree. I like Barristan, and I like how he thinks and how different it is from Danny's point of view on the whole political situation. And I think he really brings something to the way we see the Marine situation.
And I think the only other likely candidate for like a POV inside Marine would be Missandei, which like leads everyone to believe that Missandei will betray Daenerys, so we can't see what's in her heart.
Well, I mean, she's like 10 years old too, so like that's not a great POV sometimes, as we've seen.
Oh, what? Arya, Bran? What are we talking about here?
Bran is more what I was
Bran.
thinking.
No,
but sometimes like, you know, his inner thoughts aren't going to be all that enlightening. Like, you know, like I said, the different perspective with Barristan here is nice, and we get we get the tidbits of backstory and stuff, kind of.
Oh yeah, no, I think it's good. I think it's worth it.
Plus Summerhall. The most important thing is Summerhall.
Yeah.
Do we ever get that?
We'll get to Summerhall someday.
Yeah.
But I do like him as someone who has served all these different kings. I like how that kind of informs his perspective, and Queen.
That's actually one of my favorite parts of this chapter is hearing that Prince of Dragonfly story at the end. And that, you know, his original nickname was just kind of Duncan just heading off anyone making fun of him at the pass and just like giving him this great nickname that he hadn't earned, but he eventually grew into.
Yeah,
like
I was going to say,
or whatever.
I totally forgot because like Barristan the Bold is something you know, they talk about all of his battles and, you know, he's the guy that would charge in there and you think like, oh yeah, man, he earned this name like on the battlefield. I always forget we get to this chapter and it was like, oh, like, he was just this like kind of sad little kid that they were like,
yeah,
you know, he was picking him up. He was like, Bears, look this bold boy, you know, like, which is just great, and it became aspirational. So
it's a great bit of PR. I always hoped that George had a lot of Barristan coming up, and so this was like we're getting his introduction. But as the years have gone on, I think that perhaps he never had as much of Barristan written as I was hoping.
Well, if you've ever listened to like live interviews with him, he has like a lot. Like Barristan the Bold was like the first turtle story he ever wrote because it was a turtle that escaped and like hid underneath his refrigerator and then came out alive like 3 weeks later. So like that's what started. He started like writing stories about Barristan the Bold turtle. So there's lots in his brain, I'm sure. But
didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah, most of his characters come from his turtles.
Yeah, no, I just didn't know.
That is a lot of turtles.
Or the first one. Now, why were
Yeah.
none of them ninjas? Just curious.
If they weren't exposed to the ooze, dummy, they couldn't be ninjas.
This was before their time, I suppose. All right. Anything else on this Barristan chapter?
I would say so. So Barristan describes Drinkwater, one of Quentyn's companions, as false coin here. And he mentions he's seen other men like that. Who do you think he's referring to there, if anyone in particular?
Renly, to an extent.
You think? I thought Renly was like legit.
Well, the blacksmith describes him as copper, pretty and nice to look at, but not worth much in the end of the day. So it's the similar situation. I don't know if Barristan had that particular view. To an extent, maybe.
I was wondering if he was talking about like Brandon Stark.
Yeah, you trying to bring up Brandon? That's where I thought you were going.
Maybe
He probably has a grudge against Brandon as well, so yes.
What about like Littlefinger?
What about him?
Well,
I
false
don't know.
coin.
I don't know if it's quite the same thing. It's hard to parse exactly what that means. I think he's kind of saying that they look to be more than they are, whereas Littlefinger is kind of the
He's
opposite.
not impressive to look
Well,
at. Like, he's
I think
small.
Barristan can only judge people on their martial standards, right? Like Littlefinger is not fighting in the list or like, jousting or whatever. He's too political. I think Barristan's more like, as far as knights go, like this guy's all talk.
He's looking at like the substance of a man is what you're saying. Like is like versus like I don't know how much he really even gives a shit about Littlefinger really because it's kind of not his realm.
Yeah,
But, he doesn't like him.
I thought it was interesting that in the next chapter, Jairus is the one trying to keep Quentyn from doing what he's about to do, and he actually has like sound arguments, and he's like, if Barristan is telling us that we should go home, I think we should do that. And I thought it was interesting given Barristan's judgment of him.
Also, I mean, it's really easy to see what Quentyn's about to do to be extremely stupid.
Yes, clearly, but still, like I'm talking about the next chapter, so maybe we can keep part of this discussion for there. But what I mean is, if I follow Barristan's judgment correctly, he's saying he's all talk and he's like all bravery but no thinking, and you would expect this knight he describes to be like, oh yeah, let's do something very brave and go home with a dragon, and he doesn't.
Yeah, it is interesting that he doesn't give it to Archibold, the other guy, who's with him. But maybe it is just as Varley says to point out how much of a bad idea this is that even Drinkwater is telling this.
I suppose say one thing where I think quietly Barristan is one of the sickest burns in this chapter with the she wants fire and Dorne sent him mud.
Brutal
line.
stuff.
Yeah, I like that. Like that comparison.
Hot fire.
But it's like the comparison is harsh, but Barristan himself is thinking that you can do much more like useful things with mud than with fire. And actually, so I'm to be entirely fair, I read this in Bina's notes, but I thought she was really right on this, that like Barristan talks about how Doran kept his plan way too secret to ever work, because when you're planning to be in an alliance with someone and you're working like the other person knows that and they don't, well, it can't work, because like Quentyn arrives and Daenerys is like, well, I didn't know, and so I didn't plan around this, so it can't work. And well, Barristan was completely right on that, I think.
Yeah, Doran's plans are not I don't know, it's a tough situation, but he lets no one in. He doesn't even let his co-conspirators in on the conspiracy, and that kind of makes it hard.
I liked all the alliterations that Quentyn was able to make out of his name. Quentyn the Coward, Quentyn the Cautious, Quentyn the Quail. That's good. You know, it's clever writing,
Quentyn,
George.
Quentyn. It rhymes with something.
Simpleton.
Nothing.
That's a hard name.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of Quentyn, we go forward one chapter to Quentyn 3, the Spurned Suitor, which is in the book. It's the very next chapter. These happen basically right at the same time. And I believe, Justin, you have that?
Yeah, here we go. In his penultimate POV chapter, our prince, Quentyn Martell, a.k.a. Dornest Ned, turns his bad ideas up to 11 by getting drinks with an angry ex in an architecturally improbable wine cellar to hatch up an ingenious plan. Our chapter opens with what's left of Quentyn's entourage, encouraging him to take the old man's advice and get the F out of Dodge. Quentyn declines, preferring to double down on conning a group of seasoned killers whom he's already betrayed once. There's a meeting to plan a meeting, a lovingly described stroll through the shittier portions of Marine. We arrive at the Purple Lotus, a hovel attached to a hovel, attached to another hovel, which is bigger on the inside. Downstairs with the wine sit the aforementioned season's killers who unaccountably failed to kill him on sight. A meeting ensues where, even more unaccountably, a frog with no money, no army, no queen, a bad record vis-a-vis honesty, and a retinue of 2 convinces a suspicious Pentashi, through chutzpah alone, that he can provide a wealthy free city thousands of miles away in payment for stealing 2 dragons that nobody knows what the fuck to do with in the first place. In a story about people finding themselves completely out of their depth and then swimming deeper, it may be the most impressive swindle of all. And that's our chapter.
Well, that's
Very
like
well
the
done.
cover jacket if this were a book about Quentyn. Yeah, good work. Nice, nice summary there. So,
Bravo.
Quentyn's plan: A plus, A minus, B. What do we think?
F? I mean,
There was a chance that it could have worked. Like, he
What?
just needed to look up and see that Rhaegal is right up above him and about to breathe fire. But, like it's
So-
pretty stupid. But it's...
So, what about the basis of this plan? Just like going back to the well and being like, "Hey, I betrayed you, but I need you to help me." I mean, that's some brass, right?
yeah, he's got balls.
I didn't think that, that shouldn't have worked, but then, crazy dragons, and it's like, you son of a bitch, I'm in. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he can still be alive. It could happen.
I mean, I think it stands in stark contrast to the next chapter we're going to talk about, right? Like, here you have someone with nothing to bargain with, bargaining pretty heavily, and pulling off the bargain. You don't have a city to give.
So that's an interesting question, right? So why does the Tattered Prince go along with the plan? Why does he decide that it's worth it to do this now?
Because he's always wanted Pentos in the back of his mind.
All right, but why does he think Quentyn can deliver that to him? Is it just
If
he's
you're riding
just
a
hoping?
dragon,
Well, a dragon.
all things
can
are
deliver
possible.
that.
But
Yeah,
again,
it's-
both of these people are they've got these crazy schemes that they want
Right.
to achieve, and so they're like feeding into each other's, not vanity, but aspirations. If 2 people have crazy plans, they're bound to both work.
I think that's it, right? Because up to this point, I think he's being very shrewd, right, and correctly calling Quentyn out for not being a reliable person. All the times he's turned his cloak, and also not really having a lot to offer. But I think, like you say, Michael, because he's so kind of obsessed with this idea of Pentos, he's compromising some of that logic for the sake of that.
Yeah, and he's been, it's partially because, he's just kind of waiting for an opportunity to kind of go over to Daenerys and join her side and whatnot.
Yeah, he's not really losing a lot if it fails, right? There's not a lot to lose here. If
Just take another contract.
So it's a pretty safe gamble by him. So for Quentyn, though, he's basically like a walking sunk cost fallacy, right? He mentions here
Oh
that
yeah,
He mentions here that the reason he has to keep going is because, of course, the people who have died along the way, and that's really his only justification for doing it, which is not a good reason to do things, but he will.
Yeah,
Sunk
that was
cost fallacy. I love it.
it's more of him just like outright like breaking down, the concept of the hero's journey and like trying to make it all mean something. It's just like, nah, son.
Yeah, that's the thing I like about Quentyn is he's not, it's not fully developed, but he's this kind of deconstruction of that, right? Where he is this person who imagines himself going on this adventure and being a hero and doing all these things, but everything at every turn goes wrong. He doesn't get any of those markers of the monomyth that you're talking about. None of that happens for him. Just it goes off the rails and it ends badly. And that's why I like that he's actually dead. I think I prefer that to him being living still.
I do too.
He really can't go back. Like he would just, everyone would shit on him. It actually reminds me of all the way back to the prologue in A Game of Thrones with the Royce guy in the Night Watch. Like he really couldn't go back either. He had to go investigate it. Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that, but indeed I felt really like sad for Quentyn because he's right. Like his sister, the sand snakes, everyone would be just teasing him about his failure, and that's basically bullying, right? And I felt sad because he can't go back, but like he should have still.
I mean, I think I wrestle with him not being able to go back, right? Like, this is lots of the characters in the books can't go back in a real sense, right? Like, Arya can't go back. There's nothing to go back to. Quentyn goes back. He's going to get made fun of, right? Like, there's a difference in kind between his inability to go. I mean, he believes he can't go back,
can't go forward, but yeah, it's
You know?
it's sort of like the rich kid can't go home sort of thing. You're like, oh, boo hoo,
Yeah, of course, but like I do feel like it's a real, very real thing for his character that. Like you just have to see the way Arya thinks about him in her chapters. It's like she has very little respect for him, and like of course between dying horribly by dragonfire and going home and like suffer a few people mocking you, it's not the same thing. But I do understand why it weighs so heavily on him, the idea to go back without Daenerys or anything.
Yeah, I think I'm sympathetic and I understand how severe that social pressure is, right?
Yeah.
It's a really strong thing that I understand why he feels that way. And it obviously, if you really got down to it, you would think, yeah, just get over it, dude, go home. But I get it. I get why that's the thing that he finds so hard to do.
Well, in his mind here too, I think that if he attempts to, in his mind, he's like, well, I'll try to get this dragon. And if it doesn't work out, then I can be like, well, I tried everything. He isn't necessarily thinking like, well, if it doesn't work out, we're all dead. Because like he
probably should have thought of. He probably should.
Probably should have. He's got to do something big enough that at the end of the day he can go, look, when he comes home, he can say, look, Dad, what more could I have done, right? She said no. Dragon wouldn't let me ride it. I'm back. Although I don't know if he'd even be able to make it home unless he does this. Because as we said before,
like demon road, but yeah, no ships.
Trying to contact the taking the tattered prince. Like, what do you think he would be like? Oh yeah, we'll double the gold and I'll take you home. Like, do you think that would even be an option? Like, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
You'd kill him somewhere along the way. So
yeah, they looked pretty eager to kill Quentyn and his companions in that room. Yeah. Like he says, I'll let you explain it, but afterwards, I'm very likely gonna have at you.
So do you not think that Barristan, because he suggests take a ship to Valentis, that there's bound to be some, and he offers to give them the money for the trip. So would that not have worked?
Oh, well, actually, technically, you are right. The port is now open.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm imagining Victorian's fleet, which is closing up.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
entries,
yeah.
so,
Of
so
course.
he
I'm thinking
wouldn't
like
have
no
had
one's
the
really
end.
getting out of there anyway. So, yeah.
An interesting hypothetical is just the middle ground. If he just stayed there and didn't try and do anything, like he obviously
And like
doesn't know that.
pledged to serve Dany, sort of thing.
Yeah, well, he doesn't know that Barristan's about to do a coup the next day, but that'd be interesting. He'd be in a really good position if he just sat down and didn't do anything.
Yeah. Another thing, Barristan maybe. I mean, Barristan doesn't know this guy well enough to confide in him, but he certainly could have used him as an ally, I guess. Maybe that would have changed things.
I think that would have been a hard road for him to take. He's not there for service. I think, as you guys have rightly pointed out, he's there for glory, for something great, to be a king or to have a dragon, not to hang out. But I think it would have been more interesting for his character if he had stuck around.
If he views it as like he can bide time, maybe he'll win her over eventually or something, or hey, maybe this king just dies. I don't know. Yeah, I just feel like maybe he needed a little more time before deciding to go after the dragons, but he is kind of, like I said, like the move of going back to the person that he welched on and being like, hey, I want to sign a new contract. I mean, got some balls, so I guess it fits.
One interesting thing I noted in this chapter is that contrary to kind of what Drink says post the burninating, Quentyn doesn't seem to have any hard feelings towards Dany, and doesn't really give a shit that she laughed at him or whatever. And it's something I kind of had forgotten about, as my thoughts were obscured by kind of Drink statements later on. But I just found that interesting, where he's more pragmatic about that situation that I give him credit for.
Well, Quentyn
I
even
think
says
he understands where she's coming from.
Yeah,
she did
exactly.
not laugh.
Yeah.
Which feels good for him, right? Because he's even getting dunked on by Jalabar Joe, apparently. So this is a nice. Nice to not be dunked on by
She
Dany.
never laughed. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting.
I guess I just don't know if he ever expected it to succeed.
You think because his dad didn't set him up very well?
I think his dad didn't set him up very well, and I think he knows who he is, right? Like, he knows what people think of him. Guys who know what people think of him don't sail across the world and successfully convince the Dragon Queen to marry them. They do what their dad asked them to do, and he gave it the old college try, but I don't think he ever really expected that she was going to be like, you know what? You're the guy. I think he did what he felt he needed to do, and he's continuing to do it.
Really interesting. I do feel that I think he wanted to believe it. I think that I think anyone would, right? They want to believe that everything will work out in the way that you dreamed. You will be the hero. You will be the person who the Dragon Queen wants to marry.
I don't think he thought as consciously that she wouldn't take him. He didn't go there thinking, well, I'm gonna try, but I know it's not gonna work. But he probably felt it more than he expressed it.
He had lots of anxiety. He was like, the Dragon Queen sounds, fearsome, and how am I going to convince her to marry me? I think he thinks something like that.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, you always have to psych yourself up for something like that.
Yeah.
You have to make yourself believe it, even if you really don't, to some degree. So
I really like the whole Hazu thing. It's funny, obviously, but it also kind of shows. It's really good at the Hazu thing, where one of his guys is like, they're all Hazu to me or whatever.
I love it.
It's very, very meta.
It is meta, but it also kind of shows. It shows that kind of that feeling of alienation that they have in this place, that they don't fit. They're just like in a sea of Hazus. It really adds to the tension of them being here and this feeling that like they don't belong. So I like that.
Quentyn just needs to watch some LSU hype videos to get himself psyched up to go face the dragon.
Get hype.
Quentyn is not Joe Burrow. They're not even remotely.
On that note, all right. Well, anybody have anything else about the Quentyn chapter? All right, moving on. Tyrion 12 from A Dance with Dragons. And Zach, do you have the recap for us?
I do. If you guys were tired of all the awesome chapters we have so far, I got an even better one for you right here. All right. Tyrion signs up for the Second Sons and himself into incredible debt, trading verbal jabs with the company's officers all the while. Afterward, he goes to find Penny, who is upset over abandoning Pretty Pig and Crunch in Yezen's camp. Tyrion fears she may be sick with the pale mare. The two set out to acquire arms and armor and meet Jorah there, who is now looking every inch the mismatched sellsword. Some awkward flirting between Penny and Tyrion ensues as they look for armor that fits. Tyrion chooses a dirk for himself and begins instructing Penny in combat, but she can only think of what she has lost: her brother Groat and her 2 animals. Tyrion slaps her and tells her that if she wants to dream, she should go back to sleep. He informs her that Crunch and Pretty Pig are likely dead and the Mummer show is over. Penny says they would have been better off staying with Yezen as prized slaves. Tyrion promises her he will find her a new master once the fighting is done. Jorah comments how they will stand no chance against the Queen, her dragons, and Unsullied. Tyrion agrees and promises that the time will come for them all to turn their cloaks. All right, so this is Tyrion's last published chapter. There's not really a lot to it, but I think it's interesting to talk about where Tyrion's at. You know, this is the whole arc through Dance, right? Is this very down in the dumps Tyrion, this depressed Tyrion who has lost pretty much everything he's had in life, and he's tormenting himself with the things he's done. So the interesting question at this point is, has he recovered from that? Because it almost feels that way at the start of the chapter, right? Where he's talking to the officers of the Second Son. He's trading jabs with them. He kind of sounds like old Tyrion here, right? He sounds like the guy who had the wit, had the control of the situation. But I think we see later in the chapter when he gets angry with Penny and slaps her, that there is this anger, this just darkness that wasn't quite there before. There was, Tyrion was always kind of a dark character, but there's just this deep-seated kind of hatred inside him that I think has not gone away, and I don't think will go away. So I think that's the big takeaway I have from this.
Yeah, I think we see him turn a corner in the last Tyrion chapter where we get the cunning, kind of methodical Tyrion back. And I think, if there's any anger, it's just because he's been paired with a character that's so useless. Like, she puts Quentyn Martell to shame. And I think that's what's really in driving his anger towards Penny.
I think you can also see it with other characters, what's his name, Kem. They're having a little talk, and all Tyrion can think is this guy is a pawn. I'm going to use him. That's just what he is, and there's no friendliness, no fond thoughts for someone like Bronn or anything. It's just I'm going to use these people to get what I want.
It's also on the eve of battle, so he his fuse is pretty short for things that aren't about how they're going to survive the next couple days, I think.
I do think, like you say, Michael, I think there's just a level of malice and manipulation that was not there before, and I think that does signal to us that he is not the same guy. He has recovered the cunning and the thought process and all of that, but it's the motivations behind it and the way he goes about it and thinks about it is so different now.
I'm not sure I'd call it malice really, because I don't think he really is cruel, but he's more callous than he was before.
Yeah, it's more he's kind of just doesn't think much of these people at this point. He doesn't have that empathy for anyone really.
Which is not quite the same thing as
You're
cruelty.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's more willing to survive by walking on the backs of corpses than I think he was perhaps earlier in the series.
That's literally the only thing I thought about this chapter. Is there anything else?
I mean, he does. There is that whole paragraph kind of about ruminating about slavery that is kind of just an interesting
Yeah, but we've got
thematic
that
talking point.
Like we got that more significantly with Dany when all the freedmen want to go back to being slaves. Like I felt like that was. I mean, it's fine here, but that was like the significant example of that to me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's one. Yeah, it's just one of those harsh choices things. You know, or the line where it's just like you always have a choice. It's usually between slavery or death.
I think it's interesting here how someone like Penny, who is not born into that system, still kind of buys into it, because I mean it's kind of the same with small folk and people who are disenfranchised there, right? They just kind of need to find a place for them. It's not literal slavery, but just finding a master of some kind, like he says about her.
Yeah.
We get a Singer Stew reference. That's fun.
There's
hammer and nail like
that is like that, but it's more about slavery than the mind, that freedom isn't free, but the greatest weapon is the mind of the slaves themselves.
Yes, very true. So just to speak to what's going to happen in the TWOW chapter, so obviously the battle for Meereen is coming, but we find out eventually that it's not just Tyrion who will turn his cloak. It will actually be that all of the Second Sons will. I guess the plan all along, I don't know if this is true, by Brown Ben was to go back to Dany the whole time. So
that was not the plan the whole time.
Yeah, I don't know.
No,
Brown Ben
definitely
is
not.
just finding the winning ship.
It's a triple cross.
Yeah.
He's just waiting for her to finally like use some dragons. Like that's really all he wanted.
Indeed. So yeah, we'll likely see Tyrion back over on that side, and that'll be interesting, of course.
Yeah, I mean, that's how this battle's going to go. Where it's just like everyone's flipping between the Second Sons and then the wind blown, and then you got Victarion rolling up. Like it's just going to be double crosses all around.
Yeah, I feel like in this kind of, like historical context, like when we were at this phase in human history and in like a story where things are set up this way, it's best to be the person that can like follow multiple options like that. Like I'm sort of betraying someone, but I've also was always kind of laying groundwork on both sides, but not like overtly, I don't know, not like too committed to either side. Then people just can kind of like laugh it off, and then you just survive everything. I mean, I think that's sort of what Brown Ben has done his whole life, right?
It kind of shows, we talked about this a little bit in the Quentyn chapter, right? It's something Brown Ben understands that Quentyn doesn't, because like you said, if Quentyn had understood that, he would have just kind of waited for the tides to change, understanding that they do change very quickly. The balance of power shifts on a dime, and if he had known that, then maybe he would have made that different choice, like someone like Brown Ben.
Just chilled out.
Yeah, because just the who's in power and who has control of the situation, it changes so fast in this world. So
you just have to make moves that like don't exclude you from being in with the next person.
It's kind of the Varys Littlefinger thing, right? That's how they operate.
But I mean, you even see that in Westeros. Like, look at how many, if there's a civil war or conflict or something, like very few of the lords actually get deposed or their houses get ruined. It's the ones that really like heavily committed to one side or the other, did things, that really would piss off the other side. And it's like, okay, well, we got to kill them all. Versus most of the lords just like, well, following orders, kind of did my thing, held back a little bit. And then, they're just always forgiven and everything goes back to normal.
You see it with Brown Ben earlier, where he was trying to buy Tyrion to give to Dany as a gift. Like, he's clearly making sure that bridge isn't completely burnt.
I think the turning sides is sort of similar to what we were saying earlier about sort of the Dornish plot and the not knowing. People don't know about it. I mean, when Dany's gone and there are dragons on the battlefield, there's a possibility that it won't be really clear that Brown Ben has turned his cloak and is going back to Dany, right? It's just going to be a mess no matter what happens. And so I'll be interested to see if it actually resolves itself well for Brown Ben, or if he's just in a battle that he has no control over, even though he seems to know what he's doing generally.
Yeah, I think Tyrion will be the kind of deciding factor in that, most likely.
One random thing. Apparently Aeron Brightflame was with the Second Sons. That seemed weird. What does he contribute to a sellsword company?
Didn't they send him away in the second Dunkin' Egg they heard? After he was an asshole at Ashford, they sent him away.
Oh yeah, I know he's over there, and obviously he eventually drinks
Wildfire
and dies.
Wildfire.
But it was weird.
But he's got fancy armor and probably good steel, and he probably brought men
whatever.
with him.
And he's a Targaryen.
Yeah,
Right.
tough
He's got
hang though.
a little
for sure.
something.
Tough hang.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there are men who have way less to offer to a free company, but they still take them just because you need men, right?
I mean, dude, he talks about the guy in the last chapter. He talks about the guy who tried to run away because the food wasn't good, and then he like makes him the cook, and then he was like, he re-upped. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah, I like that.
Uh,
All right, that's all. Anything else on Tyrion?
Also, yeah, like all
I
three
get
of these chapters are just like middle chapters leading to another like a more important chapter.
It's funny too, because with this
Yeah,
one, 'cause it's the last published Tyrion
Yeah.
chapter in like 9
I
years.
know.
So. Yeah,
That's what I was gonna say. Is the only thing is this is kind of a weird thing. Like this is where we end with Tyrion in like the published works, and it's been 9 years now, and we're like, what's going on?
It's almost like this wasn't the planned ending, and George ran out of book space to put the last few chapters in.
I don't know really. I think like yeah, it's always my argument. I know, but if we didn't have those 9 years waiting, I think we would just think differently, and we felt differently when you first read it, because it's still kind of a striking chapter. You get the old Tyrion back. You've got the last few lines where it's like, yeah, I know we're on the losing side, and I'm gonna change that. And it still works for me. It's just if we had the book 4 years after that and not whenever, it would we would not have the same opinion of it, I think.
Well, I mean,
You're
for
right.
Tyrion here, everything seems to be like on the edge of a cliff, ready to go over, which is, I guess,
Which is not
like,
a bad way to end a book for
right,
a character.
if you're doing like episodic content, or it's like the end of a show and or the end of a season and a couple months is a new one, like, okay, that's where you leave it, and it's coming right behind. And I think he did have some Tyrion material written. I mean, because we've gotten preview chapters and stuff. Obviously, we know he had stuff written for Winds that was not put in this book. So I don't know. I mean, he seemed fairly confident that he would get it out much sooner than now.
Yeah,
so
that's the thing. Yeah.
If it comes out 2 years after Dance, you're like, oh, whatever. Not that bad. Now we're 9 years later, and it's like, oh.
Oh, indeed.
On a personal note, I find myself much harder on chapters like this now than I was when I read them the first time.
Yeah,
Right? Like
yeah, I
it
think
feels
that's fair.
like now we're in the morass. Now we're in the circling our tails, waiting for something to happen. And I didn't mind that so much 9 years ago, but now it's like, am I this?
Unlike some of the more like lore heavy chapters, there's less to pick through and less to like say, oh, hey, I picked up something new in this chapter. Like when we're going through a lot of these kind of procedural chapters, so then they don't feel as interesting on like the fifth read,
Yeah, it's just like when you compare it to just the energy and the writing of the other chapter we have here. It's just like it's such a stark contrast. But
I'd be interested for a little ranking system of like sellswords via like their relative honor, like Golden Company's at the top and the the Brave Companions is at the bottom. I'd be interested to know where the second sons are on that spectrum.
like any second son, they're firmly in the middle.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I want a
Just the
leaderboard.
middle.
I definitely want a leaderboard.
I need to know all these mercenary companies. Where do they rank? Let's.
Some
Maybe
fantasy
we can-
novels conveniently like have a character being like, "Oh, well, they're the third best company," and like like, come on, George, build that world for me. That's all I care about. Yeah. All right. So, do we want to move on to the Foresaken chapter?
Dun dun dun.
So
Ooh,
they've
so one One thing that I noticed that ties these 3 chapters together, they all involve consorting with sellswords. So Bloodbeard throws the head. They talk to the Tattered Prince. They talk to Brownband Plum. This is the sellsword podcast in each of the chapters. Interesting, isn't it?
Oh, it's super interesting.
Sellsword's very
Good
interesting.
catch.
Dario is in every one of these companies. There's a Dario in every sellsword company, is my theory.
And they're all Dario, actually.
And they're literally Dario. So we have these 3 chapters here, which are very closely related. 2 of them are right next to each other in the book. This last Tyrion chapter, I think, is like 6 or 7 chapters ahead of the other ones. So not too far separated. And then we have the Foresaken Winds of Winter preview chapter, which they're saying is taking place about the same time here. These are all like mid-July. I don't know exactly how it's the timeline for the linear reread is a little hard with the preview chapters, so we're just sort of doing the best we can based on the work of other people on Reddit, basically. So hey, sure, this could be right about now. I'm good with that. Sounds about right. So let's see. Matt, do you have the recap for us?
Such as it is. Yeah. So here's my 1-sentence recap of this chapter, which is Euron reveals his Kanye West state of mind with his "I am a god" speech, and he gains his powers by literally drinking the Kool-Aid.
That's actually perfect. Euron is Kanye. It makes sense.
And then I just have
The
some
Stranger Walks.
drunken notes I wrote down after the Baltimore game last night. I don't know. Yeah, I find it shocking just how much of his family he has killed and or raped over the course of his life. I think he's over 50% of his immediate family, which is ridiculous.
I think one of the clues that we get in this chapter is that he didn't actually push Balon. His hand was in on his death or whatever. He says something like that, which lends that faceless man theory.
Right, it's the confirmation of that.
Yeah.
And so yes, it's the usual stuff. Obviously the sighting of Pyat Pri, the Valyrian steel armor. We get more imagery of the Night King's corpse bride. There's some interesting quotes like, "If a god is raised him up, then the god must strike him down." His description of the drowned god is also very interesting to me. Damphair still sucks, as he's misogynistic towards his sister. And then the "take me to the water" line laughed because it's remind me of that silly singing bass fish on the wall.
The Big Billy Bass?
Yeah.
Singing the Talking Heads?
Oh my god!
Yeah.
Oh my god, that is great.
And those are my notes on the chapter.
Oh, we've somehow reached the big mouth Billy Bass phase of the reread.
Yeah.
So
I wonder if you can
thinks-
still get those in yard sales. They still show up.
Oh, for sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Who thinks that the end of this chapter represents the culmination of a certain prophecy that we see in House of the Undying?
Ugh.
Jesus Christ, what's that?
Ugh.
It is a corpse stood at the prow of a ship, eyes bright in his dead face, grey lips smiling sadly.
So is that Damphair?
It's Aeron, but it in turn represents Euron. Because this comes in one of the triplet prophecies, where it's Mother of Dragons, Bride of Fire. The first one is a silver horse trotted to a darkling stream, which people think is Dany and Drogo. The second one is obviously that, and then the third one is a blue rose grew in a chink of ice and filled the air with sweetness, which everyone obviously assumes is Jon.
Mm-hmm. I must say, him being tied to the ship is like, it just kind of like hit me that we may get, kind of a chapter of the battle between the Iron Fleet and then the Redwyne and High Garden fleets, and get all from the perspective of him just tied to the front of the ship, which
oh, absolutely.
All of a sudden, like, super excited for. Like, that's an awesome way to describe a battle and with like a point of view.
I never thought of that, but that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
I can't picture Aeron smiling sadly about anything. Like, it just doesn't fit him to me.
So do you want me to tell you what's going to happen? I have a feeling that in this upcoming battle, there's going to be magical phenomena occurring. So, like, krakens are going to start appearing and pulling ships down and stuff. And then I think that the drowned god himself will make an appearance, and he's going to stare right into Aeron's eyes, and then Aeron will go laughing mad, like the guy who goes into Cthulhu's mind. Because he
So do you
realizes
think it'll be?
So you think Euron's going to show up?
the drowned god. Yes,
Euron,
I think he
yeah.
will.
Well, so I think the idea in this chapter, right? The idea posed by Euron is that all these gods are false, right? These are all just creations of man, manifestations of some kind of idea that they're trying to put into the world. And I think the drowned god is included in that. So I don't think the drowned god will show up, but maybe some kind of deep one.
Some kind of monster.
Something.
Well, the thing that man calls the drowned god, which is some deep one monstrosity.
Yeah. So that
But
might
what
happen.
would be the point of that? Like, wouldn't that just turn the entire world upside down if the fucking gods decide to show up and do battle on the seas? Like, that
Oh, but not
take
if
the
they're
story
not
in a
real
different
gods.
direction.
You know, like if
Just-
it's just
just for
a
this one
giant
battle.
monster.
Because they've been throwing corpses into the sea and stuff, so it's like this huge sacrifice or offering.
Dead things in the water.
Yeah, to an extent.
I think it's notable when all these gods are mentioned. It doesn't mention the gods we know in the story have some kind of power to them, or at least the forces associated with them do. So the old gods, R'hllor, and maybe even these deep one things. Like the things that actually exist aren't included in being speared upon the Iron Throne. So I think there is something to those forces being a real thing that could appear in the story and have some kind of influence. I don't know how much with these ones because they haven't really been set up to the same degree. But it would be cool.
Well, for the old gods, there's no like dogma or priesthood really to like represent. You know, there's weirwood trees really, but
yeah, but it's still religion.
he does have a priest of R'hllor in the hold with all the septas and Aeron and everyone, which I found a little shocking considering like what we've seen of the priests and their abilities to kind of sense danger to their own person.
These are low-level priests. They don't have that power.
I found myself wondering about the extent to which Euron understands the power of King's blood and whether or not he's actually preaching something different than he believes. Because he talks like the priest's blood has power, but the people who are lashed to the front of his ship are the Folly of Flowers, who's pregnant with his child, and his brother, both of whom have King's blood in them, as opposed to all the other randos who are attached to other people's ships.
Oh, interesting. You think it's like a fake out?
Well, isn't
Yeah,
it
well,
like
if you're telling everyone King's blood has power and you're the king, right? It might be easier to say, no, it's the priests. It's the priests. Look over there, please.
Well, isn't it like the ultimate fuck you to the gods that he just like described to Aeron? It's like not only is he killing his brother, but also his unborn child, like the ultimate kinslaying or something like that.
Maybe. I mean, he could be. He could invoke the powers of King's blood without even understanding that was what he was doing, and then think that he had created this magic when in actual fact he did it unintentionally in trying to screw the gods.
So, guys, shade of the evening. What's going on there? Why does Daenerys like taste like foulness, and then Drogo semen, and then like something else, and Aeron just tastes like disgustingness?
Yeah.
No, it's described as like he tastes like multiple things in there, I thought.
Yeah, but for Aeron, it doesn't.
No, I thought he did. I thought he, there were parts of it that I read last night. I thought he said like the taste was ever shifting as it went down. But I don't know. I don't have the text in front of me.
No, yeah, I remember the same thing. Like, the taste goes from sweet to yeah.
It says it was thick and viscous with a taste that seemed to change with every swallow. Now bitter, now sour, now sweet.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a bad batch of Shade of the Evening. It's just it went off.
I thought it symbolized their life.
Maybe it's a really good batch.
Oh, okay. So
He
Aeron
cut
has
it
just
too
had a
much.
shitty life, so it doesn't taste good at all.
I think that's what I was
Yeah,
thinking
like-
too. Actually, yeah, he just has no good memories.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny if he's like tasting his past, present, and future, and he's like, this tastes like shit.
What an Iron Islander.
I was gonna say, I just think it's worth noting. I think this is some of George's best writing, which is why it was so energizing for the fandom at the time we got this chapter. It's just there's just like an energy to it that is really that you can feel, that's very palpable, and it's just really obviously good horror writing, which is something that he excels at. The terror of what the situation is with Aeron and just the escalation of that. It's all very strong, and it got me more interested in this part of the story in a way that I wasn't before, which is really, really cool. And just an isolated chapter being able to completely change what you think about some of these characters. Just some of the lines are really good, like the it's always been night in the belly of the beast, and just the idea of the black wine sea, and a lot of the ways it describes the situation that Aeron's in the hull. It's beautiful. I really love it.
When he comes out right at the end, and like the sky is red and the castle's on fire, it's just like he's come out into some other dimension almost. It just feels psychedelic horror.
Yeah, especially with the Valerian's steel suit and how he's glimmering and looks like some kind of demon god or something.
It's freaking ridiculous, man. Valerian steel armor. I mean, so we covered this chapter when it came out. We talked about it on the Euron cast. We've talked about the chapter quite a lot, actually, and it's a really, really good chapter. I don't know if anything will be changed when it's finally published, but I mean, it is a great chapter.
I like the Night King Corpse Queen imagery in one of the dreams, because it very much, that's what the impression I get for Euron is that he has been taken in thrall by the others to do their bidding, essentially, in some aspect.
You think he's in league with the others?
Yeah, in the same way that Saruman
Knowingly
was
or
serving
unknowingly?
Sauron.
But Saruman knowingly,
Right.
allied himself with Sauron. Like, do you think that's what happened? He talked to the Great Other and was like, "Hey, we're buddies."
I couldn't say if there's been like a telephone conversation, but I just Something else from this chapter is that there's a little bit more evidence that Euron was a failed apprentice of Bloodraven. So I feel like he has had some exposure to the coming doom. So his flag is a red eye on a black crown with two crows next to it, which admittedly isn't that much.
Both got eye stuff going on.
Like he's a failed apprentice?
The red eye obviously being Bloodraven's. It mentions ages ago that there's bits and pieces that he got really sick when he was a kid, like Bran did. He had that dream where he said, "I thought I could fly, but when I woke up, the Maester said that I couldn't." What else?
Well, he has a red eye, right? That's the one he keeps patched up.
Is it red?
Is it red though?
I thought so. Hold on.
All right.
Supposed to be
What
black.
color is Euron's eye?
It's black.
About to say, I thought it was like
Supposed
a
to be pure black.
kind of like a milky,
White
like
or
it's all
something.
right. Yeah, it's almost like a glazed over,
Damaged, yeah.
damaged eye. I mean, but he's got the bright red eye patch. So
But I mean, to me, all of that also goes with the question of what are those visions and those dreams? Like, what control does Euron have over them? Because it seems like he does kind of show Aeron what he wants him to see, but it's coupled with what Aeron fears. But like, what truth do they have, and who conjures those?
Well, I think Shade of the Evening just gives you prophetic images, whether you like them or not, and then some of it plays on your expectations and your personality, like it did with Daenerys.
So are we 100% convinced the woman with pale fire hands is the corpse bride of the others?
What's that? Who's this? I mean,
No.
did I miss
Queen.
something?
Yeah, so it's the queen standing beside Euron at the Iron Throne.
Yeah, but what connection does she have to the others prior
Yeah, I was
to
kind of
chapter
wondering
part
that
of-
too.
Just
it's
that
part
he
of the
knows
myth.
they're-
It's just part. It's the
he
myth of
knows
the
that they
Night King.
exist, and he I can't really explain this, but when he says, I say all of Westeros is dying. These are the dark days where the world will break and be made. Days of gods and kings and whatever, and it just really feels like he has sensed the coming apocalypse and wants to get in on this in some way that helps him. And I just imagine that there is some manipulation coming from the others.
Well, I mean, if he had been both to the far north and to Valyria, then he theoretically could have been exposed. I mean, exposed to both sides of what we understand to be magic in this world, right? I mean, it seems like he's calling upon water magic, which seems to reside in a couple of places. And it seems like he has this deep tie to Valyria. It wouldn't be surprising to me to find that he was being manipulated by the Great Other, thinking that he was bringing the death of gods because he had been to both of these places and survived both of those challenges.
Yeah, I'm so curious about what went down in Valyria with him, like what he found and what he learned there.
I think he's a liar.
Oh, you think it didn't happen?
Yeah, just because when Roderick has
You don't think he went to
scene-
Valyria?
No, when Roderick has the scene and says, "Have you?" and then Euron just gets really pissed and tells him to shut up, like that's coded language for he's lying and overcompensating. But yeah, that's just my take.
Well, I think he's definitely not telling the truth. But I mean, where does he get all these wonderful toys?
He could have gotten it from the Warlocks, because that's also where he got the dragon horn. That's just one idea.
Maybe.
So while Aeron is kind of tripping balls, he says that Euron showed the world his blood eye now, dark and terrible.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question of whether he went to Valyria is interesting, right? Because no one else has been able to do that in a way that didn't horribly destroy them, like we have the story in Fire and Blood about how badly that goes.
Yeah, what's her face with the worms or whatever.
Yeah, so.
Which makes me think he is a liar.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid take on that.
Because she had a dragon and he didn't. Yeah.
So it just seems like a place you just can't go.
Yeah.
So how could he do that?
But where did he get the suit of armor and the horn?
Well, I mean, there are still like Valyrian swords and stuff, like lying around in the world, just part of the previous, like what existed before the Doom, and why not? Like,
Where'd he get
might
a
have
dragon's
found
egg?
well, where did
exist as
Danny
well, like-
did? I mean,
Under Winterfell.
nope.
Stop it.
It definitely,
I'm sure he's plundered
it definitely
crazy
could have come from
places.
somewhere else. Yeah, I mean,
Just
the
not
middle of the
Valyria.
world. I mean, there's also stuff we don't know. Like the map is only so big, right? There's places that people in this world just have never gone and never really even thought to try to go.
Yeah.
So,
But wouldn't that be more of an accomplishment, like finding a new place than being like, oh yeah, I landed in Valyria?
oh yeah, totally. I mean, I personally want to know what happened in Valyria. I hope that we do get that. I'd be disappointed if we don't, but you know, I'd also kind of understand if we never get that.
Yeah, the interesting kind of
Explanation.
metatextual question, right, is if it seems to be in this chapter that Euron is being set up to be a significant player in the end game of the story. So I guess the question is, like, how plausible is it that Euron is one of the major forces at work in the world at this late in the game? Like, he's being set up as one of the primary actors. Does that seem reasonable?
Or
yeah, I
is it a
agree.
fake
I
out?
think he is. Like, George took care to plant him in the story as in a Clash of Kings, which I think is where a lot of the expansion of this story took place. So I feel like he was always going to be a late game major villain presence.
Yeah, I think that it's a very George move to like set things up 3 books out, you know. Yeah.
But I mean, shouldn't it be constricting? Like, do we fucking need a new villain?
That's the question, right? Is it like is he continuing
might.
to do what George has been accused of, which is continuing to create more threads and not closing threads?
If you think of him as a puppet of the others, which I'm going to keep peddling, he serves more as connective tissue from Daenerys going to south of Westeros and then presumably going north. Yes.
Well, Euron has been like mentioned by people for a while now, since like Theon and like a Game of Thrones to like a Clash of King and stuff. Been mentioned a few times.
Oh yeah, I'm not disputing the fact that he's been set up as a force in the story, but it's just when thinking about what the end game of the story is, right? You know, we have a lot of things at play. We obviously have a lot of conflicts brewing on a kind of human level in Westeros with God, I'm forgetting his name, Aegon or Vagon or what have you, with Daenerys, of course, eventually most likely showing up there. And everything like that, but also, of course, the others invading and everything associated with that. So having another thing there, like, it's just kind of hard to parse what that looks like. But there's 2 books. I think it's possible it can all work.
Maybe.
I see interactions with
whether it's 2 or not.
Yeah.
Or 7 books, 7 more books. We're gonna get.
Yeah,
But
I think if
but
you
also,
figure
like,
it out, you should write to George.
Yeah, but also like the 2 major battles are about to take out a number of major players. So, especially on like say the villain side, if most of the Boltons are probably gonna die quite soon.
Yeah, I think we're about to lose a lot of people in this next book. I mean, we see at the end, Kevin's out. Whatever's happening with Cersei, and I think stuff's gonna hopefully gonna move
as
quickly.
well. Something with that.
Yeah, something's gonna happen with some of the people that have been fairly powerful in the story. I don't know. I mean, like even like Cersei could die. You never know. Like,
God, I hope so.
Well, I think she will eventually. It's whether or not it's. Yeah, I mean,
soon is what I mean. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Stannis and Cersei are the ones I'm curious if they survive wins or not.
Yeah, I really care more about what's going on in the north, you know?
Right.
I mean, that battle's going to be a lot of fun, I feel.
I like Euron being a wild card. I like wild cards appearing.
Wild card.
Yeah, like the best books, wild cards. Have you read them?
Yeah, we don't like the books, actually.
So I like that being a thing that complicates the story. It's just a question of can George then put it together? That's the question. But I like him being another kind of wild force that's going to disrupt things.
So in Aeron's one of his psychedelic visions, Euron blows a horn to his lips, and krakens, dragons, and sphinxes all come and bow and perform for him. So in the last podcast, we were discussing. Well, I was suggesting that Euron's going to get a dragon somehow. So I think this is evidence of a sort. And I also think this is naturally evidence that Kraken's going to be showing up in this battle against the Redwyne fleet. But we will see.
So that was adjacent to that. That was another potential theory that I thought could be the white fire woman, which is could be Viserion. The actual dragon, the white dragon.
What?
So, yeah, just a manifestation of that.
No.
As we know,
I
dragons
hate
white
are
dragon?
male nor female.
He's like golden cream or whatever is his color.
Yeah, he's like
Close enough.
Well, yeah, I guess he could be kind of a white. Yeah.
I'm excited for Krakens, but I hate the idea of Euron getting a dragon with some stupid horn or whatever.
Yeah, me too.
Or
but
if he has two horns.
It might be a
Horns mentioned
temporary
in one,
thing.
and then he'll have two.
It's
So-
interesting though. It means like because we kind of think of the dragons are as being on the side of like fire magic. If we've got fire and ice, but maybe like any other kind of magic that they can be used by both sides, which would be kind of a game changer, I think.
Well, George has always stated that he's not into magic classes. There's a uniformity to all of these to an extent. Like there's overlapping bits.
Yeah, but
So-
there's also like the idea that dragons are really specific to Targaryens, specific to like just fire, obviously. So it doesn't mean they. I mean, the idea I had, at least when they were born, is like that they are creatures on the side maybe of good, even if they also can be quite violent. But that's because they come with Dany, and so you have her perspective of them. It would be really crazy to see Euron with a dragon. That's it. That's just what I think.
Well, isn't it in Martin's own words that they're to symbolize nuclear weapons? And he was a Vietnam protester, so I think dragons, in his own opinion, won't be the best thought of.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I don't think they have a particular side. They just happen to be very useful in defeating what we presume is the real threat of the others.
Yeah,
The dragons will do what dragons do.
clearly. I've got to go back and listen to the podcast you all did on this chapter a while ago, because that's actually the first. That's the way I discovered VOK. Like a friend of mine sent me that specific podcast where you talked about the Foresaken chapter, and I was like, "Ooh, wait, I haven't read that yet. I can't listen to this podcast, but actually, this guy seem like interesting, so I might listen to other episodes." And that's how I got into the reread and VOK in general. But I don't think I ever got back and listened to the Foresaken
Nice.
cast.
It's
Yeah,
hard to believe that was 4 years ago.
it's
Boy.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was this is the last
Before
preview
my time.
The last preview we've had, right? So
Yes.
it's the last one.
Was
been
the
a- it's been a
Sansa one
minute.
after?
I don't think so. I think it was
Sansa was before.
I mean, we've
remember.
gotten like half the book by now, haven't we?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, he eventually hit a point where he just said he was going to stop releasing preview chapters.
Yeah, I think he said he had the like half written back in 2013. So I think that he probably scrapped half of it and started over.
Yeah, it's funny. This one wasn't even published at all. It was just transcribed. So it's
Yeah.
not even a like published one that we could see.
Right. Yeah.
So
Oh,
I guess
man,
we're all
he's-
waiting for the 13th. I guess he's gonna makes his annual announcements on 13th about New Year's or something. Some bullshit.
Why?
Well, I mean, he's already.
Why on the 13th? Because why specifically on that day?
I don't know.
Because it's unlucky. It's a ill omen.
Oh, is
I'll
this
say
like
he's
a
already-
TWOW release theory thing?
No, someone brought it up on the last podcast because I was bitching about how he hasn't given us a TWOW update for the new year. And someone was like, oh, he updates on the 13th every year. So I just took him at their word, like I do most of the time.
I did not know that.
Did
Yeah.
no
Okay.
background investigation, and
You heard it here first from Varley.
Classic Varley.
It's the 13th.
so
Also, well, Varley, come on,
Facebook
guys.
just put out conspiracy theories with no evidence backing them up.
Varley
Yeah.
destroyed
I mean,
you
that
with
is
red eyes of Euron
Tomorrow.
10 minutes ago.
That'll be before this is published. So
So
this might be
it comes out
published and be
tomorrow.
completely
Fuck y'all.
irrelevant. Yeah.
How disappointing of you, Adam. Like, I mean, you could publish that in 2 hours like Bina, but no.
I could put this up today, and I might, but I'm on call at the hospital in like 2 hours.
This was
So-
a joke, you know.
No, I know it was. But no, I
Get it out.
prefer to get these things
Literally
up like
die.
quickly if I can, and just get them done. We done? What else?
Yeah, we done.
What else we got? Anybody have anything coming up? I know we're going to be doing a Mandalorian podcast soon, and we've got Harry
An
Potter
hour, right?
going on, more rereads.
Yes.
We're coming-
Potter's back.
Harry Potter's back, y'all.
Yeah.
He
With
never
Bina,
left.
we were talking about maybe doing a Anne with an E episode again, because we've been
the Netflix
watching that.
show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, 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 really awesome. I'm way into it. I've been watching third season was just released, but I've rewatched the whole thing in like a week, and I'm really excited. So we'll see if we do a cast on that.
Yeah. There's so much good stuff.
Witcher.
Good stuff going on right now. Witcher's going to be coming out. We probably won't do anything on that new Dracula that just came out because it's terrible.
Is it?
Yeah, I've
watch
heard that. I haven't
like
watched
that.
it, but
I watched the first 2 episodes and they were okay. Like, I was like, okay, what's going on here? And then the third episode, I mean, they're like hour and a half.
Adam,
Yeah.
Adam, you need to understand about Stephen Moffat is he doesn't like things to make sense.
I
Just
know.
need to go with it.
I
Moffat.
realize that. But anyway, I just it was like retroactively after seeing the third portion of that. Like I was like, oh, those last 2 were kind of a waste then, I guess. Like it was pretty bad. But
I heard that
if you
third
watch
episode was trash.
if you watch just the first one, you'd probably be okay. You could watch that and you could just stop and be fine. But reread, we're almost done. We've only got, I think, like another 5 or 6 episodes of the reread before we're like all caught up, and wins will be announced once we finish. So
The day we finish, it will be
because
announced.
I mean, yes, we've talked about this before. He's clearly waiting for us to catch up
yeah,
before he releases it.
he's just sitting there ready to press the button on that old computer. To like
There's a lot of people counting on us here, guys. We gotta finish this fucking reread.
Speed through here. So he has made that arbitrary line in the sand with like the World Con this year or whatever.
I know.
Don't believe that shit. Don't believe that shit.
I'm
know.
waiting until the deadline passes. I just nope. If it comes and goes and something happens, then great. But yeah. All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I look forward to the next episode of the reread, which will be Quentyn's life. So we'll be covering the Kingbreaker, Barristan's 3rd chapter, the Dragon Tamer, or lack thereof, Quentyn's 4th chapter, and the Queen's Hand, Barristan's 4th chapter. So this is like all happening, kind of one after the other, I think, where we get revealed that Quentyn is faking his death for a greater cause later on. All right.
Oh, boo.
So I think Bina's probably hosting that, and that'll probably be out before this one's published.
I
All
just
right.
picture Quentyn showing up with like an eye patch and a beard, just like this was all my plan the whole time.
I'm not
I've been
Quentin, I'm
Euron
his
the
brother
entire
Martin.
time. So you guys take it easy. I'm gonna start chopping this one up. Make sure my recording worked.
Fun time, guys.
Cool. Okay, guys.
See y'all.
Yeah, it was
Thanks,
very
everyone.
nice and super nice to I want to say meet you, Justin, like hear you at least.
Au revoir, Marie.
Yeah, it was good
All
talking
you
to you
as
all
well.
again.
Yeah,
Au revoir,
Justin, you're
Matt.
great. Come back for more of these.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks.
Tighten up.
God damn
Bye,
it.
guys. It was
No.
great.
And,
No.
All right.
Guys, we're terrible at this. Am I the only girl here?
Bonjour, Marie.
Salut, Matt. Tu vas
Well,
bien?
Abby was going to be here.
Yeah, I know, but she dropped out.
It's a very unbalanced cast.
We're just going to refer to you as the girl.
Nope.
Ah,
Thank
that's not me.
I was watching someone do a thing where they were like casting an old like 80s pulpy cartoon and they were like playing into all the shitty tropes of that time and one of the roles they had was the girl. That was just like the name for the role, and they also had the girl but bad was another.
Oh, gosh. I told
I'm
him
glad
to be
to be
ready
exciting.
for certain questions, and then I'm going to ask him different ones. That's how I do that.
Let's make him
So
drink
what's your
down a
favorite
shade
season of The
evening.
Expanse? Just randomly.
What's your favorite city in Essos?
Pentos.
That's a good choice.
I mean,
I'm
we
not saying
also the Doors of Stone. Like there was like a leaked release date from that, but I don't know if that's real
Wait, what?
or not.
Really?
I haven't. Nothing's been confirmed, so like they're saying
How long-
potentially August of this year, but
Really?
but
That's
like I
past
said,
Worldcon, though.
don't get excited though, because
I'm not gonna, but I want
Yeah.
them to.
How long
But
has it
part
been
of you
me
is
too,
gonna.
me too. So maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the year we get these books.
Hope springs eternal.
But if not, there's lots of other content, like not Netflix's Dracula, but other things.
We
to
are, in
watch.
fact, I think, getting a new Gentleman Bastards this year. So maybe this is the year.
We are.
How long has it been since Wise Man's Fear?
It's been
Ooh.
the same, 2011.
Oh, really?
Boy.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.